Finish up the meetup here with a panel about how we should be growing our data science or data engineering career. And for this panel, we have 4 amazing panel people. So we have Zia from University of Toronto, we have Armand from Deloitte, we have Catherine from Shopify, and we have Jack from Johnson. And it's kind of easier for all of you to kind of present yourself a little bit. So can you start with explaining a bit your career path and where you're currently or working at? So can you start, Catherine?
Me? Yeah, sure. So I got into data science from software engineering. So I was working as a software engineer for a Boston-based software as a service company. And I had been with them for about 4 years as a principal software engineer, and ended up working on a personalization product, which involved trying to understand how to do things like A/B testing. I ended up getting really involved in that, and just got very, very interested in the actual sort of statistical inference side of things. And once I kind of got a taste of it, there was just no looking back. I realized I was just far more interested in statistical inference and machine learning than I was in software engineering. And so I ended up basically kicking off the data science initiative at that company that I was working at. Started a data science team there and ended up hiring several sort of machine learning engineers and data scientists, and then focusing mostly on natural language processing. Then, for various reasons, I ended up in Australia. So I'm married to an academic, and his career has taken us all over the place. So we ended up moving to Australia, and I kept the same job for a while, but being 16 hours ahead of your team is a bit tricky. So I then ended up working for Accenture in Australia. They were just starting their AI and automation engineering group, and I was their lead for natural language processing. But about 4 months ago, we moved back to Canada, and this is where we're staying, thankfully. So I'm now working as a data science manager for Shopify, working on their Shopify Plus product, which is based here in Waterloo. That's me.
Thank you. So very similar to you, I also started as a software developer, but unlike you, I don't have all of those cool stories from all over the world. Yeah, so I started, like, software development basically paid the bills when I was wrapping up my undergrad dissertation in generic AI, I would say. And then for my master's, I started doing a little bit of multi-agent systems. That was my open or gateway basically to what we used to call data mining back in the old days, where it wasn't called data science yet. I still kept working as a software developer, and this is back home in Iran. And then I moved to Canada in 2011 for a PhD program at Western in London. I still kept working as a software developer and made like some money here and there. And then I started working with a company on a part-time basis in London, built a team for them. Then we realized that we need some AI capability. At the same time, I was part of a research group that used to be an HCI, information visualization research group, but wanted to go towards visual analytics. And because of my data mining background, I helped them write a few grants. We started some very small projects, again, similar to you, mostly NLP-based. And then I got lucky, and from that company, I started working on a part-time basis again while I was doing my courses and my research. I got lucky and started working on a part-time basis with Deloitte on an engagement for a few months. And then I moved from one team to another. and I'm still with them right now. What I do for a living on a daily basis is I'm part of a team called DSpace. It's an innovation lab, and I'm a data science team lead over there. I also work with other data scientists in Toronto and Montreal for AI and strategy.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm not actually a data scientist, so I won't bore you too many details of my career. I run a local startup called Job Junction. We're an online talent marketplace. We help businesses connect with students, recent grads, job seekers in general, to help build career pathways and talent pipelines for companies. Prior to doing that, I spent a year working in higher education technology solutions at Desire to Learn, and a year in project management in real estate development and construction before that, and used to work at Western University as well as part of the Senate there.
Hi, my name is Ziad. So I started my career again as a software engineer. That seems to be the popular route to take into data science. And I joined a company called Teradata a long time back. Teradata, I was a part of the enterprise applications group. And being Teradata heavily relied on analytical intelligence in their enterprise applications. So I used to work a lot with data. And when I say data, I mean these really huge data sets, which 15 years back was reaching close to 1 terabyte sizes in production environments. And after a certain time, we hit the limit of what you could do using normal SQL. So we started writing applications that ran within the database, which was an innovation, and we started infusing that with statistical modeling. So I worked with, the term data scientist had not been used, at least popularly at that time. So we called them, statisticians. Probably you have heard of that term. So we had these statisticians, we had these scientific researchers. I worked very closely with them. I used to implement the algorithms that they came up with, so the mathematical models, the statistical models, and I was one of the engineers who worked on the first machine learning framework that we developed for ourselves. So internally, so just like TensorFlow was an internal Google framework, which then they open source. So we had our own internal one. So this is like 12, 13 years back, we wrote the first one in C++ that ran within the database, and would return all kinds of the statistical modeling or mathematical modeling and give you results for that. Then I moved into a couple of banks. I moved into management, so less of an engineer, more of a manager kind of a role. And moving to a bank meant that I was now the consumer of these applications as opposed to the producer of these applications. Then I really built my knowledge, cut my teeth, and saw how these systems are actually used in real world environments when you have huge databases, when you have all of these varying requirements, and the kind of challenges that you actually have in capturing real world data and trying to run these applications on real world data. So that increased my appreciation of what these systems were trying to do, bring order to chaos, or trying to bring some kind of intelligence to there that seemed to be ad hoc. So I worked on quite a few of these enterprise applications, particularly had a tilt towards data science, if you will, or data analytics, if you will, or business intelligence. I moved back into software companies because that's where my passion lied, to do software development, but again, always with a tilt on applied AI or applied ML. I'm not an ML researcher, I'm not a data science researcher, but I am from the applied side. And yeah, the past few years I've been doing my PhD at University of Toronto. Again, not as a researcher in the space of machine learning or data science, but mostly how does this apply particularly for enterprises, large-scale enterprises. If you're trying to make an enterprise more AI-enabled or AI-ready or cognitive capable, what does that mean? How would the systems need to be designed to be used over there?
Cool. Thank you very much for the introduction. And so we are going to take now about how would you, for example, see someone in a junior role, or how is that person actually, for example, growing further in a senior role and in a data field, and we're currently just kind of thinking more like for the individual contributor level. So I would say, Jack, you kind of first see a bit like how, if you're like hiring for people or looking for people, what like companies are looking for, and then you kind of can go, yeah, I will take it then next to the other people for kind of seeing how you see it in your company as well.
Awesome, yeah, great question. And so just keeping in the context of individual contributors and not management at this point.
And for the data field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is important to keep in mind too that companies are thinking about investing in human capital and potential here, right? So even if you're not being hired for, you know, a senior or a management position, they're still looking for skills, soft skills in terms of learning capabilities, adaptabilities, communication skills, critical thinking, leadership, because the demographics are shifting all the time. People are matriculating in and out of the workforce, and as that happens, companies want to be investing in human capital that can grow with them, right? So being able to showcase and market those skills is a really effective way to help capitalize on that potential, and that can mean taking on extra responsibilities outside of your core tasks in a job. It can mean stepping up on committees and volunteer teams, just finding opportunities within that workplace to demonstrate those capabilities before you have a chance to use them in your current actual role. That can be a really good way to help get noticed by management for those promotion opportunities, and ideally moving into some of those leadership roles yourself. I mean, I think that's a question later on, right?
Oh, yeah, okay. So, it's, yeah, kind of, yeah, you can choose which one is starting out, so. For like, how do you say, like, how do you see people like moving more like from a junior to senior roles in the field, in your companies, or how you have?
So I would say, first of all, at a more junior level, I think the really important thing skills-wise to focus on is the fundamentals. So actually making sure you have a solid grasp of probability theory, statistics, math, rather than focusing on some of the sort of maybe slightly shinier things that you're hearing about, but focus on the you know, a lot of these techniques have been around for decades, and getting a solid grounding in those is probably sort of first and foremost. And then when it comes to like growing into a more senior position, I think it's really important to sort of choose. I mean, data science is it's a very broad field, right? There's so many different types of work that come under the heading of data science. And so it can be difficult to kind of know, like, do you have to learn everything? So I would say choosing a domain that you're particularly interested in is really important. So for me, that was natural language processing, which is a natural fit. I've always been very interested in languages, but you know, just find a particular area that is the one that you'll want to like give talks on at the local meetup, or whatever it is that enables you to kind of really foster that kind of real expertise in a domain. And it doesn't mean that you are pigeonholing yourself. It just means that you're using that's the domain you're using to kind of really start to build an expert level understanding of the field. And you know, what you learn for that particular domain will apply to other domains as well. And it's just good to have that kind of focus to gain real expertise in the field.
So completely agree with you. I can give you one example based on knowing the basics. This is a personal example of working with somebody who was very keen, and this is closer to the end of last year. This person was very keen on trying a certain type of, let me rephrase that. He wanted to implement for a tech classification problem something that is built on top of BERT, but had no hands-on experience of simply vectorizing it up, right? Even the very basic ones like TF-IDF, right? And so that's a personal example. That would probably never work in most of the cases. You have to know where the basics so that you could use the more powerful stuff. In that sense, I completely agree with you. Another aspect of what you just kind of mentioned, and I want to build on top of that, is figuring out what you want to be a specialist in. That's how I personally conceptualize it in my head. And I think it's also important that we don't just put barriers around the terms data science, because, well, two reasons. One, this is a data science and data engineering group, so we should talk about that as well. And also other things in the stack. So a few years ago, if you wanted to be a data scientist in a general umbrella term, You didn't really need to know how to productionize, how to use, let's say, GPUs. You didn't really need to know how to create a very simplistic front end for your model. All you care about is which algorithm, what's the best metric, and that's it. Now somebody else has to ship this. That has changed, I would say, drastically in the past 2 to 3 years. Now the stack is getting fuller and fuller for whenever somebody's trying to get the junior position, because that's based on what I'm seeing. A lot of schools are teaching or training junior people. So a lot of more junior people know more, not very detailed, but know more in terms of all of those components in the stack. So I think getting a basically hands-on experience as a generalist data scientist, but also focusing on specific parts in that pipeline, whether it is front-end, back-end, science, engineering, it doesn't matter. A combination of those two, I would say, is a very good sign, at least from somebody who's interested in hiring and or putting somebody for promotion, because it shows that you are also keen to learn other stuff and get out of your comfort zone.
Hi, thanks. These are amazing answers, and it's difficult to actually add to something that has not been already said, because everything's so valid. One way for an individual to distinguish themselves from more junior individuals or trying to be more of a contributor to an organization is to focus on the problem. So as you get more experience, the idea is to move from a more activity-based workday to a more problem-solving workday, especially as data scientists or data engineers, because we are so close to these problems. These are conveyed to us, and this is the problem that I have. I need assistance in evaluating it and figuring it out and solving it, coming up with insights. So people come to us saying, these are our problems, and please help us, provide us with insights on how to solve them, or can you please tell us what the reason these problems are happening. So for an individual to very quickly distinguish themselves is to help solve those problems. Tell, okay, this is the underlying reason why your sales are not going up. So a problem has been presented to you. We don't know why the problem is happening, and you show it. It is because of these factors that your sales are going down, or it is because of these factors that your solution is not working out very well. What you have considered is not working very well. We work with data, and that data tells us stories, and those stories are then used to convey the reasons for problems happening. So yeah, to me that is being able to solve problems, understanding what the problems, and giving answers that will help solve the problems.
I'd love to just build on that. Actually, that's a great point, and it makes me So the ability to focus on the problem and having the maturity to be able to say, no, in this particular case, machine learning isn't the answer, for example, because a lot of people are just so in love with machine learning, the very idea of it, so they start with the solution. They go, basically, I have a hammer, which is machine learning, show me your nails, so the ability to actually step back and really look at a problem and focus on the problem instead of just being so obsessed with this wonderful solution called machine learning, I think it's a real sign of maturity in a data scientist.
I'd say quickly too, asking about problems you can solve is a great way to help nail a job interview. So if you're trying to go from nothing to junior as well, something to keep in mind there.
Cool, thank you. So now you need mostly focusing on the technical part, so how really become a subject matter expert. But if you then come in a new point in your career when you want to grow a bit more into people leadership, what's kind of the strategy that you would be actually doing then? So, and I will start with Sia now. Yeah.
Okay. So I sort of stumbled into leadership or management. It wasn't something that I was aspiring to. I'm at heart a geek, a nerd. I enjoy the technical intricacies of how systems work and altering its behavior by writing code and programs. So that's what I enjoy. I think the reason I stumbled into management was, if that's what the question is I had this ability to convey information from one side of the organization to another side of the organization. So what I mean by that is, so when I was working with data scientists or statisticians or mathematicians, I could understand what they were saying, and that was not something that many people could. So I understood the language, I understood what they were trying to tell me to do. And then I would turn around and talk to a business analyst and tell him that this is what the mathematician is saying, in the language that the business analyst would understand. And I didn't realize that this is something that I was doing until it was actually brought to my attention in my annual review cycles that you are very good at this and you're able to convey information one side or the other. So you're able to talk to the business analysts, you're able to talk to the mathematicians, you're able to talk to the quality assurance engineers, try to understand the problem, the type of work that they do, and the reason they do it to solve it. And you always have this acrimonious relationship between software engineers and test engineers. And to me, I always consider the test engineers to have a different perspective while they were trying to solve the same problem that we are trying to do. So it was this ability to actually act as a liaison between different departments that probably caused me to be asked to lead and contribute in a manner that I normally would not myself have wanted to go in. So that is how I actually ended up being there. So if I could convert this into an advice, would be just have the ability to be able to understand different individuals' perspective, be able to converse in the language. You don't have to have a very good understanding of the space, but just be able to converse with them intelligently, and then turn around and explain what you've just, the exchange that you've had to an individual in that person's speak, if you will, and that would take you in great places.
Amon?
If you don't mind, I'll
Yeah.
go last on this one because I still need to think about it.
Okay, no worries. Okay.
So I would say that people management definitely isn't for everyone, right? And it's not the only option in terms of career advancement. I guess it depends on the structure of a particular company, but this is always kind of the big question when you're in a technical role, right? Is management the only kind of thing available to me? But more and more you're seeing these kinds of roles where it's like, so at Shopify, for example, there's staff data scientists. So they are technical leaders, but not necessarily people managers at all. So depending on what your kind of, if you feel you're more of a technical skills person, you might choose to go the staff data science route. But then in terms of if you do want to get into people management, an obvious place to start is by mentoring a junior data scientist, getting a feel for, like Zia said, like the kinds of communication skills that are really necessary in order to be a good people manager. I want to just throw out a couple of recommendations. There are a couple of really good books on this topic. So one is The Manager's Path by Camille Fournier. She's a software engineer. So it's all about this idea of going from a technical role into management. And then there's another one called The Making of a Manager, which is by a designer at Facebook, Julie Jouot, I think. And she tells just she really brings alive the kind of what it's like when you find yourself suddenly being the person that everybody's looking to, and what to do when everyone looks to you, I think is the kind of subtitle of the book. So yeah, highly recommend both of those for lots of just really insightful kind of, what does it mean to be managing people? How do you balance that with the technical requirements of your role? So yeah, lots of good stuff there.
Yeah, Catherine stole my main point about mentorship. I think that's a great middle ground and kind of transitioning between individual contributor advancement and moving into being a manager, just cultivating some of those skill sets. Being a great individual contributor doesn't make you cut out to be a great people manager, right? So finding opportunities within your role that allow you to develop some of those skill sets on the side can be a really good differentiator there, and getting recognition for doing some of those things can really help you with your progression pathways as well. So yeah, mentorship being a good opportunity there. Also ownership of projects. If there's a new initiative coming up on your team and the team manager or team lead is looking for somebody to take point on that project and kind of run it, that can be a good way to kind of soft test some of those skills without having the full responsibilities right away. And again, earning that recognition and cultivating those skills at the same time. Books, doing professional development outside of work hours too. lifelong learning in general is a great thing to set yourself apart with, but again, you're not going to get a lot of experience managing people in your day-to-day individual contributions, so finding opportunities there to build it in extracurriculars or other study materials can be really beneficial.
Okay, I think two important aspects after thinking and listening to everybody here is, one, I think people start becoming a people manager by managing themselves, and lifelong learning is one of them. Number two is pinpointing mistakes and accepting it, which I'm going to do right now. I think I made a mistake, like everybody else thought first, because you took both of my points. But I completely agree with you. I think that being a people manager is not for everybody, but it doesn't mean that it's not for you. I think you should try it. Everybody should try it if they want. And I don't think there is any failure in trying. If you try and you see it's not for you, you're not enjoying it, or it's not your best suit, then so be it. But you could start by managing yourself and see whether or not you could do it for yourself, and you could help yourself, and if you can't, you probably need somebody else's help. So at the same time, when you're mentoring a more junior person in terms of expertise, you could also get mentorship from more senior people and learn from them at the same time, and try to do A/B testing, so to speak, on some of your more junior folks, and see which one actually works in real life in the context that you're going to work in. Apart from that, if you are not planning on, or if you think you're not good at being a people manager, I can give you another example similar to the staff data scientist that Catherine just mentioned. There are different roles, each of which is some sort of a subject matter expert, so to speak. So you could start your career from software development or being a data scientist or whatnot, and then end up becoming a salesperson. Because we have friends from Microsoft here today, I could tell you that I have a lot of friends who work in Microsoft, and their sole, basically main job is to try and be champions for Azure, right? And a lot of companies need that. It's not just the big players, startups need that as well. Similar to that, if you're working for a smaller team, I think being the person who is very tech savvy, enthusiast, and then the person who learns something and then tries to communicate it back into a small team is also an experience that is going to help you understand whether or not you are somebody who could become a tech savvy and subject matter expert in terms of, let's say, becoming director of something, which is a habit of a lot of startups, at least in this community. You start as a data analyst, and after a few years, 2 or 3 years sometimes, you become the lead data scientist. So that's another good point to start. If you're learning something, try to put it in general terms for people in your team, startup, doesn't matter, and then see if you can actually communicate that, because if you can, that's your strong suit. And a good people's manager needs to be able to communicate.
Okay, cool, thank you. And so we are all like now talking about developing those leadership skills, either technical skills or like people management skills. But how can you actually track the progress, or how well you actually are gaining these skills? Because the challenge is, for example, if you work in a small startup, you don't have many peers actually to compare your skills with. So what are some strategies for this? And whose turn? Yeah, Armand.
Sure. One thing that I've been trying to actually do here, well, not here, in downtown Kitchener, is creating a peer-to-peer data science group. That's an amazing opportunity. You get to delegate learning different stuff to different people, and then you could gather as groups. This can happen, this used to happen on campus a lot for different research groups. And I think that's something that we're missing, and we're very lucky that we have something like this here. But if you have a peer-to-peer group of, let's say, all the startups that are working in the same building, and let's say 80% of them have some sort of a data scientist or senior data analyst role, you could compare yourself to them as opposed to other data scientists or data engineers in your company. Another thing that actually worked very well for me is trying to compare my knowledge with the knowledge of all the people who are usually guests on very famous podcasts. Once they talk about something, if I don't understand it, I know that I have to go and refresh my knowledge on that, or at least get a better sense of what they're talking about. That's, again, I think it's a virtual peer-to-peer network.
Cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. So it's just not being in a small organization, which can be challenging. The same applies in a large organization as well, because in a small organization, you probably have more interaction with other individuals. You are constantly being, having interactions. You're being assessed on the quality of your contribution. In large organizations, because there may be geographical spread, there may be distances between different divisions, even though you may work in a large building. So gauging yourself against other individuals in a large organization is also very challenging. I've worked in a large organization. I've worked in a couple of very large organizations. I've worked in smaller organizations, and I can tell you, for me personally, large organizations are more problematic to work in because it's difficult to gauge your contribution and how well you're doing or how underperforming you are. So the community is where I measure my level of competency or level of understanding. Just so Arman is right, spot on. I mean, that would have been my answer as well. Being engaged in a community of peers is an excellent way of knowing how well you can contribute in situations when you encounter new challenges. You know what are things which are happening and how well you understand those topics. You know when you need to put in more effort because the world under you is slowly shifting, and you sense that when you're engaging in a community such as this. That's why these meetups are so important. People bring new ideas, you can discuss them, you can understand them. In any company, they are so fixated on solving problems using existing approaches, you don't realize when the world around you has shifted. It's only when you move out of that company, you realize that your skills are no longer valid, or you're no longer as competent as you thought you were. So yeah, this is a very, very good answer.
Catherine?
Yeah, I have to say, this question isn't one I've actually given much thought to before, like actually measuring your progress towards, in terms of leadership. Although maybe with the exception of sort of thought leadership. I guess I would measure that, like I speak at conferences fairly regularly, and always looking to have like an original take on a particular aspect of AI and machine learning. And I guess one gauge of that is A, whether whether my talks even get accepted at all, and B, whether people really take something away from them and really appreciate them. But other than that, yeah, this idea of like being aware of what's going on in the community. I use Twitter to stay in touch with what's going on in machine learning and AI, and there's a wonderful NLP community on Twitter as well, and so just getting a sense that you are really keeping abreast of what's going on in that community. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And Jack?
Ooh, original takes and going last. That's a tough combination. Yeah, well, definitely echoing the points on peer-to-peer mentoring groups and meetup groups. I was at a talk recently, maybe a couple weeks ago at Shopify called Failure Nights. It's definitely a good, there's a lot like this, but essentially startups and scale-ups get together, and a few project managers or team leads will go up there and talk about a project that they ran and how it failed catastrophically, and you can learn some really interesting things from that. So that's a cool, like, just a little extra angle on that. But yeah, peer-to-peer networking with other people in a similar space can give you good external metrics, but I'd also really recommend setting internal metrics for yourself. Once you're actually in a position where you have direct reports, if you're handling regular one-on-ones with them, a good audit that you can check is, okay, have your direct reports bring up like their top 3 concerns, and you have your top 3 concerns, and if there's no alignment between those concerns, that's probably a communication problem that you need to be addressing. So it can be a cool little acid test you can perform that way. And then again, a takeaway from those failure talks is just doing post-mortem kind of debriefs on your projects, whether it's successful or not successful. How can we learn from this? Is there ways the team could have worked better together? Because ultimately you're taking ownership of that, right? So Facilitating good team dynamics and communications is an essential part about being a people leader, and that's always something you can be working on improving.
Cool, thank you. We will finish off with a final question, and then the audience can still ask some questions. So, do you have a 5-year career plan available for yourself? And if you do have one, how does it look like? Who wants to kick off with that one? Okay.
So in my first real job, I would say, in my early 20s, I was in Silicon Valley. I had the director of software engineering. He sat me down. I was nervous. I was new in the country, in the US. I was in the Silicon Valley, which was this amazing, incredible place, and I was very nervous. And he realized that, he recognized that I was struggling. He sat me down, and I still remember that conversation, or bits of that conversation verbatim. And he gave me some good advice, but what I would like to share with you is, he told me that you should always have a plan of what you'll be doing in 5 years' time, or where you will be in 5 years' time. He told me, think about it, think about what you would like to do, and then you measure yourself how close you are at getting to that stage. So I made a plan that at 25, this is where I'd be. I was fresh out of school at that time, so I was like, by 25, this is what I would have to do. And then I categorized that as being a geek. From a personal angle, this is what my personal ambitions are, this is what my professional ambitions are, this is what my learning ambitions are. And then I broke that down. So then at 25, I visited that, and I wrote it down. And I visited that. Then I did the same thing at 30. I made a plan from 25 to 30, and Gmail was there at that time, so I wrote myself an email. This is what I plan on doing from a personal angle, this is what I plan on doing from a learning angle, and then from a professional level. And then I did that at 35, and then that at 40. So I kept on doing that. I kept on sending myself emails, and I would go back every few years and seeing where and what, where I was with regards to all of these plans. In fact, that's one of the reasons I did my PhD, because I realized that I had written this objective, and I never did it. So then I was like, I better get serious about this, because if I don't do it now, I would never do it. So I actually went back to school just because I had written myself an email saying that by this age, I want to have a PhD. And I was, at the risk of never being able to accomplish that ambition of mine. So there are lots of things like that. So yes, I would say it's very important. I'll give you the same advice that my director gave to me a long time back, almost 20 years ago, saying that this is what you need to be doing. You need to see where you are in 5 years' time. For me, it was more have a 5-year plan as opposed to see where I am from today, 5 years on. It's like, make 5-year plans. I write it in an email. I send it to myself. And with Gmail, it's very easy to search back to find what we are doing, and I have been doing it. And I have plans 10 years ahead. So I have one that is, my current 5-year plan, and then there's another one that I have, again being a geek and a nerd, that is beyond that, but slightly less formed, slightly less well developed. And it always stays in focus. So I know that I need to be getting to that stage. Otherwise, you get busy in your day-to-day lives, and you just forget things that you wanted to do, things that you aspire to do, forget.
Oh, thank you. Who wants to add something to that? Catherine?
I can add the complete opposite. so for me, it's kind of more of a cautionary tale of like what not to do, because I don't recommend people sort of follow the way I did things. Kind of two main reasons. So I mentioned earlier that I came into data science from software engineering. That was in fact the second pivot in my career. So what I studied at university was actually international marketing with German and French. So I've pivoted twice, and I always kind of can't help wondering, God, if I had just done computer science like at university, where would I be now? So that's one thing, and then the other thing that I don't recommend is basically if you really care about your career, don't allow yourself to be dragged around the world because of somebody else's career. Because that's, everything worked out fine for me, and I was lucky, but it was a major upheaval, and it's definitely not the ideal thing to do for your career. It's very disruptive. So there you go.
Cool.
No 5-year plans.
Then I don't need to feel bad for myself. Cool. Yeah. Armand?
Before I answer that question, I can't not think about this, whether or not there's another dimension where you did a computer science major and you're now director of sales and marketing in another country. So I hope that's not the reality. So my answer to this question is do it, but don't get married to the idea. When I started doing my PhD, I went to Western because I wanted to continue on the topic of my master's, which was game theory and multi-agent systems. Then I had to switch my supervisor, not once but twice. And then I ended up doing visual analytics. And let's say 2014, I decided that I probably don't want to apply for permanent residency and stay in Canada because I wanted to move to Germany because that's the mecca of visual analytics in the world. And this is where I'm sitting right now, which means I didn't end up in Germany. But so when it comes to details, I agree with you. But I think it's good if, at least for me, it worked. I had a framework. So for example, I'm not going to go back all the years, but since you asked for the next 5 years, definitely the past couple of years I've been telling myself that I have to finish writing my dissertation and graduate, so that needs to happen. So you're an inspiration, I will follow your lead on that. But apart from that, I think there are certain milestones that I have, at least personally for myself, to be able to do this and that and that. I can give you a few examples. But apart from those milestones, the path to reach from where I am to the first and second and third milestone, to be honest, personally, I don't care. If I can find a way to get there, it doesn't need to be optimized. If it is optimized, perfect. If it's not, if I can find a way to get there, I will be happy. So getting that thing done, that's my, at the back of my brain right now. A few other things is getting, certain types of relationships in different organizations. That's something that I think I'm very good at, and I think I want to continue doing that. So I can give you a few examples like Mars and Vector and a few Canadian VCs and stuff like that. Or getting in a more leadership role in a company, the firm that I'm working with, or somewhere else. Again, details, it doesn't matter to me, but as long as I can hit those milestones, and when I come back and look at today and tonight, I say check, that will make me happy.
Cool, thank you. Jack?
Yeah, okay, so 10 years ago, I had a very well laid out 5-year plan, and I followed every step of it, and hit all the execution metrics and everything, got where I want to be at the end of it, and I was totally miserable along the way. I double majored in philosophy in university, and the philosophy of the pilgrimage really stuck with me, and that's the idea that you need to pay attention to the journey, not just the destination. So keep that in mind, and don't be afraid to revise that plan whenever you're not happy with what you're doing anymore. I got so fixated on the end-term goal, and I was willing to make all these sacrifices in the short term to get there, and you can get burnt out and then not accomplish anything as a result of that, right? So just some good context to keep in mind there. When I got out of university, I thought I was going into politics, and obviously I'm not doing that. Hopefully 5 years from now, my company is a lot bigger and more famous and successful, and maybe I can be looking back with some of you on the awesome jobs I helped you get if you're looking for work. But yeah, I try to keep things a little looser now and just take advantage of opportunities as they come, if that makes sense.
Cool, thank you. Are there any questions in the audience?
So I heard some of you mention some resources that you were learning from in your careers. I heard some LP from Twitter from Katie and some podcasts. If you could drop some names, that would be very, very awesome.
I can mention a few podcasts. So there's an NLP podcast, I think it's called NLP Highlights from the Allen Institute for AI. But probably the best machine learning and AI podcast at the moment is This Week in Machine Learning and AI, Twiml AI, with Sam Charrington. It is really excellent. Data Skeptic is another really good one. Each episode is on a particular topic, although he's actually doing an NLP theme, or has been for the last while. And yeah, those are the ones that come to mind.
So my second tunnel, definitely I'm a fan. I don't miss even one of the episodes. I have a huge list. What I could do is I could probably put it in a group. Practical area is one that I sometimes like, sometimes I don't. Twiml I usually like. NLP highlights, sometimes I think they're too much.
Yeah.
But again, I can't remember off the top of my head. I can definitely put a list of the ones that I have subscribed to at least. There are like 12, 13 that I listen to every week, usually while driving. So I could put it in the group if you want.
Okay, cool.
There's another one, or
Yeah.
other resources.
Okay, cool. Sid?
So this is a question from a junior data engineer who's wanting to go into a senior data engineer position. The problem I face is that the tech stack at my company is legacy, and I'm looking around and people are talking about Airflow, Spark, deploying into microservices, Kubernetes, and all for data engineering stuff, which we are not doing. So if enterprise experience is a requirement for a fellow who is looking to get to a senior position, now I don't have, at least the end person I'm working at is not interested in fancy stuff. Now how do I get that?
So that's a problem that I've personally encountered in multiple companies I've worked in, where you have legacy tech stack and the world has shifted and has moved. It's very difficult to go to the management of a company and say that, hey, we should modernize our application infrastructure, our underlying IT infrastructure, just because the world has moved and we've not. It's going to be a very short conversation. What we need to convey with conviction is, why is there a need to actually move to something different? There's going to be a lot of disruption, there's going to be a lot of cost, there's going to be opportunity cost, because the amount of time spent in just shifting technology stacks is time not spent developing features which will make the company earn money. So there is an opportunity for us to do that. So first of all, there has to be a justifiable reason that will make sense to the management of the company. But this is why we should be moving. The arguments could be that it's difficult to find individuals with the technology skill set who can come in and hit the ground running and start working. The individuals who are commonly available have a certain skill set which we know, which we don't employ in this organization. So that could be one argument, and you could justify by saying that this is what the cost is and this is what the perceived benefits are. Another cost could be the cost of maintaining legacy code base. It could be very high. There could be a lot of technical debt that has been accrued, and paying that debt off is huge. So it may be better just to start off scratch. Something that was done very difficult 10 years back can now be done very easily and simply, especially with a solution that is designed to do that. Like I mentioned that I used to write my own machine learning frameworks 15 years back, but is that something that I want to maintain today, or is it something that maybe I could just use TensorFlow for? Something that has been designed by individuals who specialize in this. So, there are always arguments to be made, but just going and saying that we should actually modernize our infrastructure because it's cool, there are new and shiny things, it's not going to be a very productive conversation. So that's one advice that I can give. And this may also be a way for you to actually differentiate yourself, because again, you're problem focused, you're identifying problems that currently exist in the organization, and you're offering remedial solutions saying that this is how it can solve it, this is how it can solve it, this is how it can solve it, this is going to be the net benefit that results from this exercise. And if you're able to make a very convincing argument, then yeah, you may be entrusted to do that. And I have done this in the past. I have told the company that we've done things which may have worked with us in the past, but they would work for us in the future. And I persuaded the management of the company, and I said I'll take responsibility for that migration, and whatever the situation arises, I'll make sure that's going to be exceedingly less disruptive with the opportunity cost being minimum, and I've executed successfully. So that has helped my career.
Cool, thank you.
Can I just add to
yeah.
that quick?
Just one question.
Yeah, it's just because we need to kind of
Yeah,
closing
no.
off, so, okay, cool.
Just super quick, as somebody who used to work in technology sales, you may be able to find some good business cases out there to help justify that opportunity to move to. I was always working with internal champions to help build business cases to mitigate some of the opportunity costs associated with change management. So depending on what you're working with and where you look to go, there may be some free assets or even an industry partner who's willing to work with you on a business case there, and taking that kind of initiative can really earn you some good points as well.
Cool, thank you. So I want to close off the panel. Thank you very much all for your contributions. You always can still ask questions further in the meetup or in the Slack channel of the meetup. And Adarsha, you also still have remark about... A question, okay.
We have a very interesting to hear the 5 years thing. Can you just give us an idea of which accomplishment that you're really proud of, and one of the things that you told yourself you'll do in the next 5 years that you did not do and you regret it?
So I think
If it's too personal, then let me.
no, that's fine. I mean, it's something that should be applicable and relatable to the audience. So there are personal accomplishments which I'm very proud of, but it would be relatable to the audience, so I'll leave those out. But for example, from an academic standpoint, or I would not say even academic, but from a learning standpoint, it's again, generally I'm a lazy person, so it's very easy for me to go home and just watch YouTube for 4 hours and seeing plants grow or cats play with shiny lights and stuff like that. So it's tempting to do that, but there are aspirations that I have written down, and this helps me. Because I know it's not for everyone, but this helps me that it keeps these things in focus. I realize the passage of time. So again, from a learning standpoint, not necessarily a degree acquisition standpoint, but from a learning standpoint. For example, if I want to learn machine learning, then this is something I have to write down, and I'll make sure that I'm making progress towards that ambition. So keeping that has been something that I have been aware of and conscious of. I've always made sure that I keep learning. So that's something that I'm proud of. Something that I missed. So I was trying to run for a marathon in my early 30s. So I did that. I got injured, stopped, and then started again. So something that I left. I didn't do it. Kids were growing older. I started family. Kids were growing older. Left quite a lot of time and attention, and I just stopped. I stopped doing that. And it's been 10 years since I stopped, and now I realize that if I don't do that, I'm not getting any younger. It's going to get more and more difficult for me as time passes, and I keep seeing that was a goal of mine. And again, I am a bit anal about such things, that if I write something down, it's something that I can't forget. So I started that again. I started to practice, train for a marathon again. So again, I'm taking it very slow. I am no longer aggressively trying to accomplish this goal just because I had it in my mind. So this time now I'm going very slowly, so I'm going kilometer by kilometer. I'm hoping that over a 2-3 period time I'll probably get to that level where I would be able to run a full marathon, because something that I had planned on doing. So these are things. So yes, there are missed goals that I remember and I regret, and I'm trying to work towards that, and maybe I get injured again, so I'll quit. But at least I know that I gave it my best shot.
Okay, cool, sounds good, yeah. That's kind of good for closing up. If you guys kind of want to help out a bit with moving the chairs back at the side, so that we can all get home pretty early. Yeah. And also thank you very much again, Shiny Docs, for hosting us, and have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.